the extent of cutting off their energy, going down to Michigan, going down to New York State, and over to Wisconsin.
Picture this, miles of semi-trucks sitting motionless on highways, their tanks bone dry, drivers pacing outside with nowhere to go. Warehouses are waiting, stores are running low, and deliveries that should have arrived yesterday are stuck in limbo today. This isn't some distant problem, it's happening right now. Overnight, Canada made the shocking decision to cut off diesel exports to the United States, and the fallout has been immediate. For decades, America's trucking industry has run on a fragile balance, with Canada playing a critical role in supplying the very fuel that keeps our 18-wheelers moving. Without diesel, the backbone of our supply chain begins to crumble. Every box of groceries, every package, and every gallon of milk depends on those trucks staying on the road. And when the fuel stops flowing, the entire system collapses in real time. In today's video, we're going to break down how this sudden cutoff is leaving truckers stranded, shipments delayed, and store shelves under threat like never before. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to our channel because we bring you the updates mainstream media won't, and you'll want to know what's coming before it hits you. When news broke that Canada had shut off diesel exports to the United States, the first reaction was disbelief. How could one of America's closest allies and trading partners cut off such a vital lifeline overnight? But behind the shock was a calculated move, part political retaliation, part economic protection. The trigger came from the escalating tariff war. Washington had announced new duties on Canadian steel, lumber, and agricultural exports. In response, Ottawa struck back where it knew it would hurt most: energy. By halting diesel shipments, Canada didn't just send a message to the White House, it hit directly at the heart of America's supply chain. The timing made the move even more devastating. The decision came just as U.S. trucking companies were already grappling with rising fuel prices and tight inventories. There was no warning, no phase-out period. Tankers scheduled to cross the border were turned around overnight. Fuel brokers who relied on Canadian suppliers suddenly found themselves cut off, scrambling for alternatives that simply didn't exist at scale. Canada has always been more than a neighbor. It's been a pillar in America's fuel security. Roughly half of the diesel used by U.S. trucking fleets comes from Canadian refineries. Without it, the trucking industry is exposed, vulnerable, and dangerously dependent on shrinking domestic reserves. This wasn't just another trade spat. Canada's sudden cutoff underscored how deeply the two economies are tied together and how quickly politics can unravel decades of cooperation. For the US, the fallout was instant and unavoidable. Within just 24 hours of Canada's diesel cutoff, the fallout was visible on America's highways. Thousands of truckers suddenly found themselves stranded, their tanks running dry in the middle of critical routes. What had once been a steady flow of commerce turned into miles-long backups of semi-trailers, sitting idle with nowhere to go. The trucking industry isn't just about moving goods, it's the bloodstream of the American economy. And with diesel supplies evaporating, the flow came to a grinding halt. Grocery store deliveries that should have arrived overnight never made it. Frozen and refrigerated goods sat in trailers as refrigeration units shut down, spoiling tons of produce and meat before they could reach shelves. Distribution hubs in Texas, Ohio, and California reported rows of trailers backed up for miles, waiting for fuel that never arrived. The ripple effect hit consumers immediately. Walmart and Amazon shipments that Americans rely on every single day slowed to a crawl. Two-day delivery promises were broken overnight. Online orders piled up in warehouses, unable to move. Perishable foods rotted in storage while trucking firms sent out desperate alerts to their clients. No fuel, no delivery. Images began flooding social media, truckers sleeping in cabs on the side of the interstate, grocery aisles going bare, and gas stations posting "diesel out" sign. What once seemed unthinkable had become a grim reality. America's shelves were emptying not because of lack of supply, but because the trucks couldn't run. This was no longer just a supply chain issue, it was a national emergency unfolding in real time. As Canadian shipments dried up, America's fragile diesel network began to unravel. U.S. refineries, already stretched thin by maintenance slowdowns and rising global demand, simply couldn't keep up. Stockpiles in federal reserves meant for emergencies were tapped almost immediately, but even those were alarmingly low after years of underinvestment. Within days, what had been a manageable supply chain challenge erupted into a full-blown national crisis. The price shock was instant. Diesel that averaged $4.1 a gallon at the start of the week spiked to more than $7 almost overnight. For independent truckers, who make up nearly 90% of America's freight carriers, this was a death sentence. Many simply parked their rigs, unable to cover costs. Without them, everything from groceries to building materials sat in limbo. But the pain didn't stop at the truck stops. For ordinary families, the ripple effects showed up everywhere. Food costs surged as shipping fees ballooned. A gallon of milk cost $1 more. Beef jumped by nearly 20%. And even basic pantry staples like bread and rice were climbing daily. Hardware stores warned that lumber and construction materials could double in price within weeks. The entire economy was buckling under the weight of the diesel shock. For decades, diesel has been the hidden backbone of American life, powering trucks, farm equipment, trains, and even emergency generators. Now, with prices soaring and supplies vanishing, that backbone was beginning to snap. The warning was clear: without affordable diesel, the US economy itself would grind to a halt. The diesel shock didn't just strand truckers, it sent shockwaves through every corner of American business. From the largest grocery chains to the smallest family farms, the crisis revealed just how much of the economy rests on trucks fueled by diesel. Farmers were among the first to feel the pain. Crops ready for shipment sat in silos with no way to reach processors or grocery warehouses. Livestock producers couldn't move cattle or poultry to market, forcing some to cull animals they couldn't afford to feed. Agriculture, already strained by inflation and labor shortages, now faced the prospect of outright collapse. Factories weren't spared either. Assembly lines that rely on just-in-time deliveries suddenly found themselves idle. Auto plants in Michigan reported parts shortages within 48 hours. Electronics factories in Texas and Tennessee slowed production as imported components sat stacked at ports with no trucks to carry them inland. The supply chain that once kept shelves stocked and businesses humming had turned into a bottleneck. Small businesses were hit hardest of all. Unlike major corporations with fuel contracts and large cash reserves, mom-and-pop retailers and local distributors had no buffer. Delivery costs doubled, sometimes tripled, wiping out already thin margins. For a small grocer or regional farm supplier, one missed shipment could mean bankruptcy. Even imports arriving at U.S. ports piled up with nowhere to go. Cargo ships unloaded containers that sat gathering dust as warehouses overflowed and trucking companies refused loads they couldn't fuel. Every delay translated into lost revenue, spoiled goods, and higher prices for consumers. The message was undeniable. Without diesel, the gears of American commerce seize up. And it's the smaller players, the farmers, truckers, and small shop owners, who bear the heaviest burden. As the diesel crisis deepened, Washington was forced into the spotlight. Lawmakers who once dismissed tariff disputes as political theater now faced the reality of stalled highways and empty shelves. The White House convened emergency meetings, scrambling to craft a response that could calm both truckers and consumers. One proposal on the table was rationing, reserving diesel supplies for essential services like ambulances, police, and food distribution. But such a move risked sparking panic, as independent truckers and small businesses would be left fighting over what little fuel remained. Another option was subsidies, direct payments, or fuel credits to keep rigs moving. Yet, with the federal deficit already ballooning, critics questioned whether Washington had the resources to prop up the industry for long. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, usually thought of in terms of gasoline and crude oil, suddenly became the focus of debate. Could it be tapped to ease the diesel shortage? Energy experts warned that reserves were already at historically low levels, and any release would only provide short-term relief. Meanwhile, industry leaders raised the alarm louder than ever. The American Trucking Associations declared the crisis a national transportation shutdown in the making, warning that if diesel supplies weren't restored, supermarket shelves could be half empty within weeks. State governments in border regions like Michigan and North Dakota pleaded with Ottawa for exemptions, while governors called on Washington to negotiate a swift resolution. But behind the press conferences and emergency plans was a stark truth. The crisis wasn't about fuel alone. It was about trust. Trust between two nations. Trust in the supply chain, and trust that the backbone of America's economy wouldn't collapse overnight. If truckers can't fuel up, the question every American is now asking is simple but chilling. How long before grocery store shelves go completely empty nationwide? Already we're seeing delays in food shipments, spoiled produce, and skyrocketing delivery costs. If the wheels of trucking grind to a halt, the entire U.S. economy grinds with it. From bread and milk to medicine and electronics, nothing moves without diesel. Experts warn that the longer this crisis drags on, the closer we inch toward the largest supply chain collapse in modern history. Unlike past disruptions caused by natural disasters or pandemics, this one isn't localized or temporary. It's structural, it's political, and it's spreading fast. The frightening reality is that families who don't prepare now could soon face empty aisles and prices that double over. But here's the truth. While Washington debates, ordinary Americans must take action. Stock up on essentials, plan for disruptions, and stay informed. This isn't about fear, it's about being ready. Because once shortages hit in your town, it'll already be too late to catch up. So what happens next? Will Canada back down, or will this standoff escalate into a full-blown transportation shutdown? Could this crisis reshape global trade and force America to rethink its dependence on foreign energy? These are the questions we'll be tracking closely in the days ahead. That's why it's more important than ever to stay connected. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join us here, where we break down the facts, cut through the noise, and help you prepare for whatever comes next. Don't just watch this crisis unfold, get ready for it.